Welcome to the Black College Sports and Education Foundation weekly podcast, where we equip students, athletes, their families, and supporters with vital tools and information that will impact their decisions on educational opportunities and careers. Tune in every Thursday night at 7 Eastern Standard Time as we host prominent guests from a variety of backgrounds, such as education, sports, medicine, and the corporate world. Remember, the Black College Sports and Education Foundation is your one-stop resource center. Now here's your host, Gil McGregor.
Hello and welcome to our podcast. Today, in reference to Father's Day, we are privileged to have, I say, a father of a pretty famous person. Fathers mean so much, and although Father's Day is a time of year or the holiday that people sometimes overlook, and daddies get them ugly ties or some piece of equipment to build something for somebody. But today we've got one of the fathers of the NBA. We've got CP1. Now y'all saying to me, who the heck is CP1? Well, see, y'all may know of CP3, but you can't have a CP3 if you don't have a CP1. So today I have an opportunity to introduce to some of you and to make known to a whole lot of you, Mr. Charles Paul, the father of the great NBA point guard, Chris Paul. Charles, welcome, and thank you for being a part of our podcast.
Thank you for having me, Gil McGregor.
Charles and I go back a long, long ways, and we have had a chance to interact with each other and know each other's family and know each other's sons. And again, Charles, when you talk about CP3, and I remember one time we were in New Orleans and he had such a real good game before the opposing team came in, and one of the guys on the other team said, "Here he comes, CP 3, 4, 5, 6, 7," because he'd been playing so well. But what is it like to be the father of one of the baddest men in the NBA? In fact, when people talk about Chris, they not only talk about how he is such a great point guard that's playing in the league today, they start to compare him with point guards from yesterday, from yesteryear, and say that he may be the best point guard to ever play the game of basketball. How does that make you feel?
Yeah, that just give me chill bump when other people say it, because, anybody can toot their own horn. And, Chris is my son, yes, but me and his brother probably his worst critics. But to hear it come from everybody else, that's a blessing right there.
Well, you talk about the blessing, and he certainly has been a blessing for everybody who loves the game. And people talk about where the game is today and where the game used to be. But Chris Paul wouldn't be Chris Paul if it wasn't for you and for the guidance that you've given him. Charles, a lot of times people seem to point the finger at our community, and they don't give the fathers in our community some of, I believe, the credit that fathers deserve. I remember a time when I was broadcasting down in New Orleans, we had a Christmas program, and the Christmas program gave away a lot of toys to kids in the community. They gave away a lot of toys, bikes and everything. And I had a chance to MC that program. But what I think made me feel really good that night, there were a lot of fathers who showed up, a lot of fathers who may not have shown up on other times. And I wanted to make sure I pointed out that since they showed up, we need to give them credit for that. And I know you've shown up in your sons' lives, CJ and Chris, all along, but give us some of the wisdom that you gave those two young men as they were growing up to turn out as fine as they have.
Well, most of it, Gil, started with family, how important family is. I can go back to scripture. Family, I come from my mom and my dad, but when I married Robin Paul, the family I'm talking about is me, CJ, and Chris. That became a whole nother entity with my family. And so we stress me and mama, CJ and Chris. And what we say in our household, what everybody else say comes after that.
Okay.
And they grew up in the church, so we wasn't really strict, but they thought we was real strict. And we always held him and CJ accountable. Even though they came from the same household, they were two different people, and we treated them as that.
Did they have a lot of competition amongst themselves growing up, particularly as it relates to the game of basketball?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did, because for so long, it was just CJ. And when Chris got up some age to play, I built a court in the basement. Our basement wasn't finished, so it was just concrete floor. And they used to compete down there, and they used to fight, and they used to fuss. I had to referee. So, yeah, they was very competitive, man. When it was time for Chris to play basketball, I told my wife, I got to coach him because he's so aggressive. So
how long did you coach him?
From when he was 5 to he was in 8th grade. My wife coached him. Then we reunited in 11th grade when I coached back at West.
Okay. And your son, CJ, he played college ball too?
Yes, he played at USC Upstate for Eddie Payne.
For fans who may be listening don't know him, Eddie Payne is a former Wake Forest Demon Deacon, a guy that I know quite well. And there's a story that you shared with me about Chris and another famous coach that saw him play when he wasn't even a varsity player that kind of made you think this guy might have a future.
Yeah, a coach by the name of Big House Gaines, who used to be at my father-in-law's service station on the regular, sitting around talking about basketball and politics in the community. CJ was on varsity his freshman year, and I took him off of varsity because I believe in playing, not standing around watching. You know, you don't get better by watching except for so much. You got to play.
Yeah.
So when Chris was on JV, he was good. He got moved up for the Frank Spencer, which was a holiday tournament when he was a freshman. And so going into Chris's sophomore year, he could have been on varsity. Me and Coach discussed it, and, you know, I'm not going to go into the other stuff, but I told Chris, I said, you're going to stay on JV. And he wanted to play up there with his brother, and I told him, I said, look, same thing you're doing now on JV, making everybody better. You ought to be doing the same thing when you move up on varsity. And right now, you don't have an opportunity to do that. And he didn't like it, but he stayed. And everything else is history. When he moved up on varsity his junior year was the first time he started getting letters. We was in a tournament in Florida. Going into his junior year is when he had his breakout year. We was playing Iguodala them. Kristen was 16. Iguodala them was 17. Chris had 35 points that game. After that, all the colleges just bam. That's when the door went wide open. He came home and said, Dad, I'm not playing football. I said, that's fine with me. The football coaches didn't like that.
Now, Charles, you bring a basketball background to the situation, too. I remember when I came home from Europe, we played pickup basketball at elementary school, and I noticed your talent. And I even remember asking you one time, were you playing in college or were you playing anywhere? And you said, no, man, I'm a family man. I got kids, so I can't be playing any ball. When did you notice, as you watched your son play, because we all watch our sons play, that there was a little bit more than that? When did you notice that maybe his talent was a little bit different from everybody else? And that aha moment when you realized that he was going to be something special. At what point did you see the Chris Paul that we see now?
The first aha moment was 10th grade year on JV in the JV tournament. What I seen him do in that JV tournament with his teammates, and the other team had more talent, more athletes and everything. But what he did that day, I'm like, wow, this roster could really be good. And I told him that when we got back home. I told him his drive and his effort and the way he got everybody involved, it was amazing. And then the next year was his junior year in that summer league when he played Iguodala them. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Now, that is some balance. And we talk about balance, and that's what fathers bring to the situation. It'll be 4 years this November since I lost my father, and I remember all the things that he taught me, and I remember all the things that he tried to teach me too. And I know that there's a fine balance between coaching and criticizing your son. Now, Charles, how did you manage that? And what are just some examples along the way that you could distinguish or help him distinguish between coaching and criticism in dealing with your son?
Wow. Coaching, you know, when I was coaching Chris, he's my son, but I realized that all the other players on the team, all the way from when Chris was 5, all the other players on my team, parents came to watch them play. And back then, each kid had to play 2 quarters. And if you had 10 players, then it go down. Somebody could play 3 if you had 9 players. I used to always make sure Chris would get all the players the ball. Everybody on the team would get a chance to shoot more than once. And it all started then. And Chris bought into it. Now, at the end of the game, always made sure he was in the fourth quarter. And I let him do his thing and still keep everybody involved. He did that. He would get rebounds and everything by being the smallest one on the court. That's how aggressive he was. So that's where it all started, YBA basketball. And the same thing Chris used to do then, and he's doing to this day. The same thing, getting everybody involved.
Now, both of your boys played basketball in high school. How much of an emphasis on education did you put on them and them getting good grades?
Oh, yes. They both had to have a 3.0 in order to play sports. Me and their mama both really stressed academics. Education was just as much as it was basketball. It started becoming so easy because they knew when they was young that the education part was just as important as the basketball. CJ and Chris both was on the roll. It wasn't one was smarter than the other, nothing, but both of them excelled in the books and on the court. So me and their mama, both of us, it wasn't just one of us, both of us always talked about, doing good in school. I went to college 1 year, went to Salem State. She went until her mom got sick. But we always told them, if you want to play sports, you got to do good in school. There's no excuse. And they know if we had to come up to the school for academics or something, they know they was finna lose the very thing that they love to do, and that was football and basketball.
When you look at our community, it's always sort of pointed at that fathers aren't always there. And you talked about AAU, and I know I had a little time with AAU too, and I didn't always like some of the things I thought I saw, Charles. How did you handle the AAU part of your son's basketball lives?
Man, I handled it by making them earn every bit, on the court, off the court. And then even when Chris had another coach and Chris got discouraged and wanted to quit because he was starting his first year, and the next year, he was still small. So they had taller kids came out and took his position. And, I had to sit down and talk to the coach myself. And I was one of the main people in the organization. And, he had to decide whether he wanted to play. And the same thing with CJ. I was CJ's coach. And when better players came in, CJ came off the bench until he worked to get back where he was at. And, you get a lot of bad stuff with daddy ball, but my players and stuff never had to worry about daddy ball. I mean, I love the game so much, and, I didn't play at the highest level, but I loved it so much that I was going to do the right thing by all the kids, and especially mine. They know they had to earn it.
Now, as we see them getting out of AAU, having to earn it, having to carry the good grade point average, having to be tough, although they were competitive with each other, as you started looking towards the college career, and both of them had a college career, Chris, obviously, in the ACC, might have been a different kind of discussion, which brings into mind the idea of young men going to school and staying for 4 years or leaving early. Or where do you, as a father coach of a superstar, where do you fit into that type of discussion?
That discussion is very deep because when Chris came out, we was having the time of our lives with Chris, at Wake Forest, and CJ was at USC Spartanburg, getting education free. And, I get what some people say you can get hurt or this and that. But still, the main reason we was going in the basketball part was the education part. And that meant a lot. So when Chris came out his sophomore year, we was debating, but we said, okay, 2 years, if you want to do it, then we with you. And he said he was going to go back and get his education. But we was in a way because CJ was going into his senior year when Chris came out his sophomore year. So we was kind of iffy with it, but we was going to let him be the decision. And it was a great decision because I'm so glad that he played 2 years because the first year they were talking about, do you believe your son to be an NBA draft pick, in the top picks in the NBA? And we said, yeah, but he ain't ready. That first year, we was good. Chris was good. All of us were saying, no, no, no. But that second year, we left it up to him, and it was the right decision.
And, Charles, I appreciate that because I think a lot of people listening have a one-sided thought about that. They don't necessarily know what goes into a family's decision when a family is involved.
Right.
And how difficult a decision that can be. Now you see him as that Chris Paul that's in the league, and you got all kinds of things that go with that. Accolades, yes. Huge contracts for some, yes. But people always talk about moving from place to place. Sometimes you get traded, you want to. Sometimes you don't want to. How has just the NBA life not the game, the highlights, the ESPN, and not the big games, and not necessarily making it to the finals of the West or semifinals, just the life of you being an NBA dad. How has that transferred in terms of what he still asks you or what you still volunteer to give him?
Right. A lot of stuff sometimes, by Chris being the president of the Players Association, a lot of stuff he educate me with now. When he was young and just playing ball and loved being there, with CJ, what we was concentrating on when he first got in the league was just him being able to play basketball and not worry about, all the ins and outs of basketball. So CJ was there to help him along with that. And then while CJ being there, he was that filter to kind of navigate him, when older people would come around and different people would try to have different discussions with him. So, we was blessed in that part that CJ went with. The longer he's been in the league, he told us some stuff that we didn't really know about the NBA and the different things and, how he's grown from being a young single man to now husband, a father, 2 kids. We've watched him mature, and some of the things that he's experienced on the court and off the court, we could see a great maturity in him now. I mean, you're talking about 14 years in the league.
That's amazing.
So we got a lot to be thankful for.
That is amazing. Early in his career, people started complaining a little bit about his strong friendships with certain players, especially LeBron James. And I think they talked about that's that AAU mentality. And, you're not supposed to speak to a guy before a game. And you're certainly not supposed to speak to him after the game if you lose to him. And that's where everybody's mad at KD because he ends up going to play for the team that beat him. How has Chris broached those type subjects with you in terms of his respect for and relationship with other NBA players?
Well, like Chris say, and like I said, you get to decide where you want to go. You don't normally get to do that on a regular basis. And we get that thing, with KD going to play with a team that already won without him, that was already great. And, I wish Chris had some of those opportunities too, in the decision where he, made. But I just think that everywhere he's been, he's made teams and people better. And, he don't have no ring now, but I mean, he's just hard working. And the main thing I believe that keeps Chris going is he loves the game. Now, the friendships and all that stuff is good, but like Chris used to see me play. Oh, when I played my friends, I played them tough. And he do the same thing. You might be friends off the court, but when you're on that court, he going to fight LeBron, he going to fight D-Wade, he going to fight anybody that's on the other side of the court. He gonna fight him. He don't care. And some other people get it twisted. It'd be different if I seen Chris, let him get layups and let him do this and that, but it ain't that kind of friendship.
I got you. Charles, there are other fathers in the league. I think of a couple of them that I've met. J.R. Smith's dad, for example. I've had a chance to interact with him. Don't know LeVar Ball. Haven't had the pleasure.
He's the most famous dad of all, I tell you that.
I know that. He's the loudest one anyway. But with that being said, have you, as a father in the NBA, interacted with other fathers in the league to talk about the mentorship and the leadership that you can give to young men who have, in some cases, vast amounts of monies that they could do a lot of things with, some good, some bad if they wanted to? How have you continued to be that father figure for Chris, who can obviously buy most anything he wants?
Oh, well, we always talk as a family because, we got the Chris Paul Family Foundation. So me, Robin, CJ, and Chris, and their wives, we sit down and talk about the different things we want to do. And Chris always lets us know some of the things that he want to do. It ain't that he got to, but that's just how he was raised. It's different people in different situations that he want to help. Some people that we want to help, some things that we want to do. So we all incorporate all those things with the bowling and the AAU team. When we got the AAU team, I started coaching again. And we did that to basically help some of the parents get through some of the things that we wasn't able to do because I had to spend my 401k because we was traveling with football and basketball. So, with that, we just try to give back and we try to get more information as well as money with everything that we do.
Well, I just want to tell you how very proud we are as a community. You represent the community conscious. You got great kids and one superstar. And we want everybody to know that they can look and hear from folk like you by listening to folk like us at Black College Sports and Education Foundation And if you like what you hear, you want to follow us, you can follow us and give ideas, suggestions at HBCU, the number 4, the word life. And Charles Paul, we hope that Chris Paul eventually gets that ring and that the next time he gets a chance to get traded to a really good team, that doesn't nobody come in and block that. So thank you so much for your time, for your insight, for your leadership, and most of all, for your fatherhood.
I appreciate it, Gil. I appreciate it so much because, like you say, there's a lot of good fathers in the league that don't get recognized, but, we stick together. And our Fathers and Men's page is FAMPBP.com. Fathers and Men's of Professional Basketball.com.
Okay. Charles, you're right my best.
You tell your lovely wife I said hello.
Okay. Thank you, bro.
Thank you, Gil.
I'm your host for today's podcast. I'm Gil McGregor. We've got everything, great programs. You look for us. You join us because we got everything we need going except you. Thank you so much, and we'll see you the next time.
Thank you for tuning into the podcast. For more information about us, please visit our website at www.bcsportsfoundation.com. Also, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at HBCU4Life. That's HBCU, the number 4, Life. To be a potential guest on our podcast, contact Ed J. Hayes at ed.j.hayes@gmail.com. Tune in next week for another amazing show.